Pokies reform was one of the pillars on which the Gillard government was built. You might remember it was part of a deal to secure the vote of independent Andrew Wilkie. But since then it's been on again, off again. Part of its latest guise is a trial of technology to limit how much money people can punt on poker machines. That trial's meant to start in the ACT next February. But not only does that timetable look set to blow out, the ACT's clubs can't be forced to take part. Political editor Chris Ullman has been uncovering holes in the plan.
Australians love gambling so much their politicians call them punters. But the numbers show we lose more than $19 billion a year. The cost of gambling surged as laws were relaxed in the 1990s. 62% of the money lost is fed into poker machines by the 600,000 people who play them each week. And 95,000 of those are considered problem gamblers. So it's not surprising that concern about the harm caused by poker machines has a rich history.
Do you think that poker machines should be abolished?
Most decidedly.
With a powerful club industry and $5 billion of state government revenue in play, getting reform is tough. But in 2010, a rare opportunity arose when Julia Gillard wagered she needed independent Andrew Wilkie to form government.
I have decided to support the ALP.
They signed an agreement which committed the government to ensuring that by 2014, all poker machines were fitted with technology that forced people to set their own betting limits before they could play.
The implementation of full mandatory pre-commitment technology, which enables gamblers themselves to control the amount of money that they are going to gamble.
That caused a huge backlash from the clubs and threatened Labor's heartland. So when opposition MP Peter Slipper jumped ship to become Speaker and the numbers in the House of Representatives improved for the government, the Prime Minister tore up her deal with Andrew Wilkie.
You do have to make compromises. That's the nature of politics.
The government offered a new deal, saying it was still committed to poker machine reform.
The legislation that the Prime Minister has outlined here today will be the first time that the federal parliament is acting on problem gambling.
And Andrew Wilkie was a reluctant recruit to the watered-down plan.
The government's reforms are but a shadow of the reforms that were agreed after the 2010 federal election.
But what are the odds that this new plan will ever see the light of day? To get a better sense of that, let's take a look at one critical part of it, the agreement to set up a trial of bet-limiting technology in the ACT.
The trial is now going to be in the bill. It will be legislated. Now, that's a significant improvement on the original bill.
ACT clubs have given in-principle agreement to take part in a trial, originally slated to start next February. But as yet, there's been no talk of how it will work. The clubs won't sign on until the details settled, and the Commonwealth legislation promised to Andrew Wilkie can't make a single club participate.
My advice from the Commonwealth is that they don't have the constitutional power to force a trial on the ACT. The only way a trial will actually come about is through successful negotiations between Jenny Macklin and myself.
Does anyone have the power to force clubs to be part of this trial?
I think probably the ACT government would be in a legislative position to do so.
The ACT government will not force clubs to take part in the trial.
We support a mandatory pre-commitment trial here in the ACT, but that's conditional on the clubs being willing partners in this with the federal government.
All this adds up to the clubs having an effective veto over the trial, but it has other large flaws. Because the territory's an island in New South Wales, the results could be skewed by people border hopping to deliberately avoid the bet-limiting machines in the ACT, and there are good reasons for thinking that. Poker machines were banned in the Territory until the late 1970s, and so the Queanbeyan Leagues Club, a short drive across the border, grew to become one of the richest clubs in New South Wales.
Well, here we are at the Queanbeyan Leagues Club having a wonderful night as usual. Jim's hit the jackpot on the poker machine again, but there's only one catch. He's going back to Canberra to spend all the money.
The pubs and clubs in Queanbeyan are also yet to hear any details.
Not in a formal sense. We haven't had any letters or anything like that. We've had a couple of brief discussions asking whether or not we'd be open to the idea of, mainly in the form of sharing data, etc. And we're open to that idea.
The Queanbeyan Leagues Club might share its data, but it won't join the trial.
I think it'd be fairly inappropriate for just one club in New South Wales or one club in Queanbeyan to take part in the trial.
There's another problem. Clubs ACT calculates the Commonwealth will have to stump up $36 million to compensate the clubs for lost revenue during and after the trial.
I challenge any business, no matter whether it's gaming, whether it's any business in Australia, to suffer a 40% cut in your principal source of revenue and survive. I don't think there are very many businesses that could do that.
But the ACT is home to clubs owned by the construction union and one directly owned by the Labor Party. Given compensation will be based on existing revenue, those clubs would get $4 to $5 million from the taxpayer.
The Labor clubs provide significant money, millions of dollars, to the Labor Party, both in the ACT and nationally, for them to fight their election campaigns. And so for the Gillard government to be giving the Labor clubs extra money or giving them millions of dollars that they can use for election campaigns, I think is quite disgraceful.
The monies between the Commonwealth and the club industry for participating in the trial will be very clearly marked out and accounted for.
With so much yet to be decided, this trial is a long way from settled.
I think at the earliest the trial would start probably mid-2013, more likely the second half of 2013.
I'm not a betting man, but if you believe the polls, then it's not likely that there would be a ALP government in power by the time this trial starts.
The Commonwealth Minister responsible for all this is overseas. Jenny Macklin's office says she welcomes the in-principle commitment of ACT clubs to the trial. We asked Andrew Wilkie to be part of this story, but he declined. There really was just one question, to ask whether he had gambled twice with the Gillard government and lost. And there's one final hurdle to reform. Neither the Greens nor anti-Pokies Senator Nick Xenophon agrees to the government's new plan, so it's doomed in the Senate. But Nick Xenophon believes the government was never really committed to reform.
I used to think the government was going through the motions, but right now it seems the government isn't even pretending to do that. I can't even get a copy of the legislation that they're proposing to introduce. Apparently, it's not available to be looked at. Now, if that doesn't show a complete lack of transparency and openness in this process, I don't know what does.
Political editor Chris Yillman.